edition of Booty and Baribeau. I'm Rachel Baribeau. He needs no introduction. He's Josh Booty. Josh, how you doing?
Oh, doing good. Pretty excited about some of the things that are happening in college football. And of course, we've seen some teams really thrive, and we've seen some teams in the SEC that hadn't done a good job lately. And my LSU Tigers is one. They've lost two in a row now, and go to Ole Miss, and they're underdogs by 4 points, or more than a field goal. So, teams. There's some teams that need to get really going, and then there's some teams that have really done a good job with the second half of the season, with Alabama being one, Arkansas getting real hot at the right time as another.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the beginning of the season, we're all prognosticators, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not a good thing for me professionally to tell people I don't really know anything. I'm guessing like you are based on last year, based on, on
Everybody gets into the preseason polls, and like nothing's figured out until this time of year.
It isn't, Josh. And you know what else happens with the preseason polls? We ran about this all the time. The preseason polls are based on what you did last year. And
Yeah.
every good coach will tell you that every single team is a different makeup, a different chemistry. You can have one bad guy that can ruin the lot. You can have a
Mhm.
great guy that can kind of lead you to victory, a la Tim Tebow a couple of years ago. So every team is something different. And then you have those rankings, and they're based off last year.
I know it, and you have to deal with tough schedules for some of these teams, injuries. I mean, we look at what happened to Baylor at the quarterback position. We looked what happened with TCU last week with Boykin going out. I mean, things happen during the course of a season. Ohio State's won 23 ball games in a row. Right now, I think they're as good as anybody except for maybe Alabama. So it's going to be fun to see if those teams end up matching up. But we've got a lot of football left to play, and these 2 or 3 weeks are going to be huge in deciding the national championship.
All right, so I was telling somebody this morning at CrossFit, I was saying it seems like, and this may or may not be the case, Josh, but it seems like this year you're having to watch games to the very end, like the very last couple of seconds, because we've had some late game, just absolutely crazy things happen. Special teams are at a premium now. That hidden yardage, that third concept, that third level of the game, if you will.
Yeah.
Am I crazy? Or do you think, because we've seen some upsets already, do you think that either Michigan or Michigan State is going to get the best of Ohio State? Are they going to come through unscathed?
I think Ohio State will go through unscathed, but I think there's going to be a scare in either this week or the next. I think Michigan State, with Connor Cook being, he says, back healthy, it's going to be interesting to see how or what kind of threat they pose to the Ohio State defense. Last year, we saw the defensive front of Ohio State really turn it on at the end of the season with Bosa and all that the group that they had up front, and if they can put some and supply some pressure or apply some pressure on Connor Cook, then it's going to be very difficult for him to do a lot outside the pocket or do anything. Do anything that he's normally does, and that's he completes a lot of passes. He plays within the system, but if you put a lot of heat on a guy like that doesn't really have a lot of speed or doesn't use his legs much, it can get difficult.
All right, Josh, I saw something this morning, made me think about my partner, made me think about you, and it was Colin Cowherd, and he had this whole truth serum. He went through this whole thing, and he said, I can tell about the economy three things: restaurants, airports, and highways. If they're crowded, the economy's good. He said the truth serum with college football is Vegas. And I know you're a bettor. You've been trying to teach me a little bit about it. But he said the truth serum on college football when it comes to Vegas is that Iowa, right, ranked right up there. Iowa is no better than, I think, the 14th or the 16th team in the country according to Vegas. But yet, we've got these people that are, they're on the committee, and I respect them, but they're comparing wins and losses and those types of things. But Vegas might be the ticket.
You're right. You're right. Iowa's got probably have Ohio State at the end of the season. That's going to be a very difficult one for them. But then they would have to go into the playoff situation and win two big ball games. Can Iowa survive that playoff type atmosphere. They haven't been there before. That's the reason that Vegas has them where they're at now. Last year we saw an Ohio State team that everybody was counting out before the playoffs, and they came in at 16 when the playoff standings came out and worked their way all the way back up and then into the Final Four. So Iowa, it can be done, but I think that people perceive Iowa a little differently than they do Ohio State.
All right, before this thing is over with, we're going to do this 365 days a year round. I'm going to have to there's going to be like some Better's Delight or something, Josh. You're going to have to give us some kind of line, like a 1-800-1900 line, Josh Booty's pick, something like that.
Some weeks I'm real good and some weeks I'm real bad. And last week you were pretty good. You called two big ones, and I was disagreeing with you on some of those. I guess I was gambling with my heart maybe with LSU and the Arkansas game, and Arkansas pounded them. But you're the one that's hot lately.
Well, speaking of that Arkansas team, I want to talk about Arkansas and LSU. Their quarterback, Allen, has just come on really strong. Alex Collins, one of the best tight ends in the country. I think the wide receiver is leading in statistical categories, the SEC, hot at the right time. I mean, that was a team, and you and I discussed in our kind of pre-show meeting what we wanted to talk about and expectations and how things have gone wrong and right for some teams. And that was a team that, including myself, many left for in the wasteland, Arkansas, and they've really gotten it together.
They have. It's I think just because of the play of Allen at the quarterback position and the running back is running the ball like crazy. Collins is doing such a good job, but the balance of their team and the way that they've handled adversity. A lot of teams go in the tank after you lose early in the season, and they don't really have the leadership or the capabilities to I guess pull themselves out of being in the doldrums, and Arkansas was able to do that. Maybe they just knew within themselves that they had enough talent on that team and some leadership enough to get them to the point where they are at today, and that's they're second in the SEC West. They have Mississippi State playing at home. They're 4-2 in SEC play. A chance to go 5-2 and really make their mark on this in the West. We know Alabama is the strongest team in the West, and Baleem had said he hadn't seen a front like that in 20 years. You mentioned that earlier, that like Alabama has. So Alabama's the strongest team in the West. There's no doubt about it. But Arkansas comes in maybe at a close second.
Absolutely. Now, LSU is another team I want to throw out there because obviously when you don't live up to expectations, and here's the thing. When we talk about expectations, Josh Booty, at the beginning of the season, we were all talking about, including yourself, about the lack of a passing culture there, who was going to be the quarterback, what was going to happen. We knew they had the beast that is called Leonard Fournette. And then Brandon Harris started to come along. And then he didn't turn over the ball for like 7 or 8 games. And then he started spinning, put a little spin on the ball. We thought good things about him. And then they hit the brick wall that is Alabama. And I feel like their kind of will has been broken. But people are talking about Les Miles. His seat heating up like a job vacancy. Really?
Well, you got to kind of go back to, Back to the Future a little bit. You got to talk about last year. He went 8-5 last year, and then now they're looking at there's something wrong with the offense and what they're doing, and I think he's going to have to make some moves in the offseason if he really wants to solidify his job there at LSU. But that's a whole nother story. I think that they've got to be able to create some balance. We all know that they have a big game at Ole Miss this week. If they play really bad on offense, people are going to really start to talk about Les Miles and the situation there and what's at hand. So it's going to be something that I really pay attention to closely this week.
All right, so tell me this. You're very close to the program. You're obviously an alum. How loyal is Les Miles? Meaning, will he let Cam Cameron go to save himself?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. He'll let him go. I think any head coach that one part of the game is really not doing what it's supposed to do. You've got to really take a close look at the situation. At LSU, you're right. You just mentioned it earlier. Before the season, we didn't even know if Jennings or Harris was going to be the starter going into the last week of camp. And so, when things are going good and there's a run game, then the quarterback position is relatively played a lot easier than if you don't run the football. And when things get tough, you get to really check a guy and see what he's made of, and you get to check a coordinator too, and a position coach as well. So you got to look at the offensive coordinator first, down to the position coach, and then to his players at the position and go, what is wrong with the situation? Why are we not doing what we need to do, in this case offensively, at the quarterback position at LSU in the passing game to get better for next year? Do we need to get rid of the coordinator? Do we need to get a passing game coordinator and add somebody to the staff? In the NFL, they've got passing game coordinators. They've got offensive assistants that help just with the pass game. There's things that teams can do and coaching staffs can do to get better, like doing that.
You know, you mentioned, vacancies and next year and all those things. You know, Josh, I don't know that I have seen such a crazy, what we're going to see, a crazy year of the off season. That's my dog, by the way.
Love your dog.
He was snoring a minute ago. Just make yourself at home. Make yourself at home. So I don't know that we're going to see the crazy offseason that I've never seen anything like it. You can call it hot stove league, silly season, whatever. We can make a new name for it. But you look at coaching vacancies. We talked about LSU. Maybe they have to make a change to the offensive coordinator. Les does to save his job. Look at Alabama. They're most likely going to lose Kirby Smart. They might lose Lane Kiffin. And I guess that's what happens. That's a logical thing when you have success. But that's a program that's been obviously on top of college football that may have to rebuild from within as well.
Yeah, you know, when a team has success, other ball clubs will come in and cherry pick those good coaches, and that's the reason that Lane Kiffin went to Alabama, is to get himself back on the right track, right? So what happened at USC is old news now. He's been at Alabama. He's had success. He's the kind of guy that could take a Miami job and try to resurrect it. He's a big name. He fits down there in South Florida. He's that type of personality. He's coached on the West Coast. He understands, all the landscape in college football. So I think guys, and I would do it, and that's smart to go. I don't know if I could be a lifelong guy on Saban's staff because he works you so hard and he's so tough on coaches, but to go and get him, to go and get that experience on your resume is huge. And I think Lane Kiffin made the best move he's ever made by going to Alabama, being in that situation under Saban, in that program where football means everything, and then he can come out of there a better coach.
Yeah, he goes in, with all due respect, kind of known as the cocky guy, known as the guy who has ridden his dad's coattails to success, right? Ridden Monty's coattails to success. He goes in and he comes out of Nick Saban's coaching tree. And that's valuable, Josh.
It really is. And if you really look at Saban, I mean, not Saban, if you really look at Kiffin, he's 40-year-old guy, but he has done so much in his life. He's been with Pete Carroll. He's coached, head coach at the NFL level for the Oakland Raiders. I mean, he's been at Tennessee in the SEC. He's been back to SC as a head coach. Now he's at Alabama. There's not anybody in the country that's 40 years old or less that has the type of experience and understanding of different ways that things are done than Lane Kiffin. And so I think he's going to come out of this thing as a diamond in the rough when you talk about being a head coach in the future. I think he just needed that time with Nick Saban. He needed that time to go back and be a coordinator and get to where he needs to get to.
Talk about we're talking about expectations. And I don't think anybody expected Auburn to be where they are today. I did an interview last night, Josh, and they asked me about the Auburn-Alabama game, and I said, well, it's kind of like David and Goliath. I'm like, wait, but David beat Goliath. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, they don't have a shot. And that's a rivalry game. For me to say they don't have a shot in a rivalry game, it takes a lot. But the ineptitude that I've seen on the offensive side of the ball, Josh, I don't think they have a shot.
Well, never say never, because if you think back a couple weeks ago, Oklahoma and Texas in Dallas was a game where no one thought Texas had a shot, and Texas came out of there a winner, and Oklahoma still talked about it as a team that might get into this Final Four. So, a Texas team that doesn't score points, take an Auburn team that doesn't score a whole lot of points, but in a rivalry game, anything can happen. I know you'd love to see Auburn play well because that's your alma mater.
Listen to you being my voice of reason. I'm over here saying, no way, no how, not going to happen.
Keep a positive attitude. You never, ever know. It's just Jeremy Johnson's going to have to play the game of his life, and if they go with Sean White, he's going to have to play out of his rear end. But to beat a team like Alabama with the way that Alabama's playing, and we talk about it on every podcast, Bama's just that good.
I'll tell you a story. The first year that I covered Alabama, 2009, graduated from Auburn, go over to Tuscaloosa, and they end up it's the Iron Bowl, and the Iron Bowl, if Alabama wins, is for all the marbles to go to Texas. Rose Bowl national championship. I'm a Cub reporter, 5-6 years out of school, something of that nature. And if Alabama won, I would go cover a national championship, which would be amazing. But they're playing Auburn, Josh. And
you didn't want them to beat your team, but you,
I mean,
you
and
didn't know what to do.
I was so torn. I remember, I had my little fan heart and I had my reporter heart, and obviously Alabama had this drive with Greg McElroy Roy Upchurch ended up in the end zone with just a couple of minutes left to seal the game. But point being, it really elevated, my reporter side, but it hurt my heart because deep down, you're always going to care about your team.
And 2 years ago, I mean, that was really one of the best games I've ever seen. When Saban tried to put the big unit out there to kick the field goal,
Yes.
and really didn't have anybody to cover that. I guess that return on the field goal. I've never seen that before. Never seen an ending like that before, and that was there at Jordan Hare. So anything can happen in this rivalry stuff, but I just think Alabama's way too dominant, and Auburn's got too many problems and issues on offense for them to be able to to win. If it'd be a case where they might win 1 out of 10 against Bama, but it doesn't look good for them.
All right, Josh, as we kind of wrap up this podcast, what else surprised you this year in the SEC as we're winding down? Now, still some football to play, but I guess I will start it off by saying I didn't think we'd see the end of Steve Spurrier.
Yeah, I didn't either. And I did a show last night here in Southern California, and they asked me, you think Steve Spurrier would come out of retirement to coach the Trojans at the real SC? And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. Spurrier. I don't think he's going to be coaching anytime soon. I think he likes his golf too much and doing his own thing. And he was such a great football coach. But I think for me, the story of the year is Ole Miss goes to Bryant-Denny Stadium and got a huge win early in the season against Alabama, and we were all like, "Whoa, look out! That Ole Miss is going to be really good." And then they lose to Memphis, and they've got several losses now, 3 losses, and I just really didn't think I thought they had too much talent to lose that many games. So I'm wondering what's really going on there. They gave up a lot of points to Arkansas a couple weeks ago, and just to see Ole Miss not really get in sync with what they should be doing with the talent that they have, especially on defense. To give up 50 points in a game, I don't care if it's an overtime or not, with those kind of players they got on defense, it was very surprising that Ole Miss didn't really kick it in after that Alabama game and really take over the conference.
You know what I think that is? I think Hugh Freeze is a good man. I think he's a godly man. I think he's a good coach. But I think, and we talk about this all the time, I think there's an added dimension to coaching, and it's a psychological aspect. And Nick Saban he'll tell you he's not perfect at it, but it's keeping your players in check, not keeping them too high, not letting them get too low. And I don't think they've learned at Ole Miss how to win, how to consistently handle their business when they are winning, not to get too heady, chest puffed out. And I just don't think they've learned how to handle that yet. Maybe they will in the future if they get a little bit more winning underneath their belt, but I don't think they've learned how to handle and keep going at that, unselfish pace, if you will, after they've gotten a big victory.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case. I mean, we can see it is every week someone presents new problems. Someone presents new things that they throw at you. Whether you're Georgia and you got to go play Georgia Tech and they run the triple option, or you go Georgia and you got to go play Alabama and they pound you with balance. I mean, it's everything. Every week is different in this college football. And the NFL is a lot of the same. It's a copycat league. In college football, Gus Malzahn runs his own offense, and it's much different than Cam Cameron. I mean, it's light years different. So every week presents different problems, and Ole Miss just doesn't seem to be able to handle their business week in, week out, and a lot of it is probably preparation.
One of the things you said earlier in the week that I thought was really smart, and I retweeted it, and a lot of people caught on to it, was being a quarterback is like taking a midterm every single week. It's pretty smart, Josh.
It is. If you really think about it, you've got a certain number of hours that you can even practice or you can study film, because as a college student, you've got to go to class, you've got to get your weight training, you've got to get your sleep, you got do some family stuff during the week too. It's like you got all this stuff going on. That's why at the NFL level, you've got like 10 hours during the day that's all football. It's set aside for football. And you show up in the morning like Peyton Manning does at 7 a.m., and he doesn't go home till 7 at night. So he's got a 12-hour day, and he can stack so much up, in that day where he can really get focused on that team that they're playing. And all the really great ones do that. But in college, how do you manage your time as a quarterback to get prepared? Because it is like studying for a midterm. What's surprising is Texas A&M, Kentucky, Georgia, that we're at the week before the last game of the season, and they still got quarterback problems. They don't even know who to start. And so there's some real issues in these SEC programs right now at the quarterback position that we don't want to, we wouldn't want anything to be a part of if I'm a head coach of a team. And I know those teams are really upset with the way their quarterback play's been.
All right, Josh Booty, another great job as always. Enjoy your weekend of college football. What's the game in closing? What's the game you're not missing? I know you're not missing any of them.
Yeah, without looking at my notes, I think the two games are Baylor at Oklahoma State and TCU at Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and now this is outside the SEC, but those are the two games that could make a big difference in this whole playoff landscape. And then in the SEC, I think LSU at Ole Miss. Can LSU get back on track? Can Ole Miss really get after LSU at home?
All right, he's Josh Booty. I'm Rachel Baribeau. We'll be back at you next week.
Thanks.
Bye now.